So one of the most important or controversial questions that get asked in our industry is, do you need a computing science degree? What are your thoughts on that?
So actually, like it's very very related to what I just said, like that there are so many different paths. I can tell you that I firmly believe that you do not necessarily need to have a computer science degree because I don't have one. So I do not have a degree. In fact, I have only been to a university once in my life, and that was to give a guest lecture. And I don't say that to brag or anything, and I don't want people to misunderstand me here to say that you don't need an education or you should never take an education. Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying again that there are so many different paths that you can take to achieve your goals, and all of them have trade-offs, and that's another. If you want to play this as a drinking game, that's another thing word you can add to the list. Trade-off. So when I didn't go to like a university to get a CS degree, the trade-off of that for me was that I had to learn everything myself, right? I had to learn how to write apps, learn how to code, everything myself. And I've been coding since I was a kid, so it kind of came a little bit natural to me in that way. Like my dad was a programmer. I became a programmer. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, et cetera, et cetera. So when I like started getting really serious about going into development and becoming like a full-time developer, like for me, the trade-off there, since I didn't have that formal education, was that I had to spend so much time like learning things on my own. And one really interesting aspect of that was that I was very kind of pragmatic naturally of my learning. Like I always learned things that I needed at that moment. So, as I was keep building websites, which is what I started with, I was a backend developer. As I was learning data structures and databases and things, I was kind of learning that as I went. And one really interesting thing that happened was that at one point in my career, I was sitting with a coworker and we were discussing like different search algorithms. And he mentioned like the big O notation. So he's like, oh, if we take this path, it will be like O of n. If we take this path, it will be like O n squared. And I had never heard of the big O notation before then. So I was like, what is this? What is this person talking about? So I had to go, when I came back home that day, I was like Googling what is big O notation and learning about that. So I think depending on which path you take, you have to be prepared to kind of compensate, because on the other end of the spectrum, you have doing a CS degree and, computer science degrees, as far as I know, are very theoretical, right? You're learning about the fundamentals of computer science. You're not learning the iOS SDK. So then you have to compensate for that by actually learning the SDK and learning the APIs. And that's something that I didn't really have to compensate for because that's how I learned, right? So yeah, I think there's no really, in my opinion at least, you don't need to have a computer science degree, but it can be really helpful and it can be one way to achieve your goals. There are also many new kind of ways of getting an education as well. For example, in Sweden, where I'm from, there is now a very, very popular trend of having these like 2 or 3 year education programs where a big part of that is spent at companies doing like, actually working at companies.
Right.
Hands-on, yeah, internships basically. And those are going to become really popular because they kind of provide a little bit quicker, easier way to get out into the workforce and to learn something rather than spending many, many years at university. And that's another trade-off there, right? And that's another thing you can go for. So there are many different paths you can take.
Yeah, a CS degree is just one of the many paths, it sounds like. But at the same time, if you aren't going to take that path, you are at least committing yourself to backfill the parts you would have learned in university. Like for you, the big O notation, at some point you think, I'm going to hit this wall, I will learn it, which you would have done at university, presumably, depending which course you took. But you will do it at some point yourself later on an ad hoc, as needed basis, basically.
Exactly, yeah. And it's kind of funny because, a lot of the things that I tend to write about and that I'm interested in are very computer science related. So, I think I would have absolutely loved doing computer science. That's not how things worked out for me in my life. So